everybody. I'm Wendy Dietzler, Director of Events and Education for Trade Press Media Group, and thank you for joining today's webcast, How to Unlock Maintenance Success with a Culture of Collaboration. As you heard my colleague Emily mention earlier, our presenter today is Miguel Ramos, COO and founder of Limble CMMS. Miguel has a bachelor's and master's degree in mechanical engineering, and the first 8 years of his career were focused on Class 2 and 3 medical devices, where he was involved with the entire production process, which include designing products, creating production lines, managing production teams, and maintaining production equipment. Today's learning objectives are: review what developing a collaborative culture in your maintenance team really entails, discussing clear steps to build and optimize a maintenance plan with a team-based approach, and learning how software encourages collaboration and helps teams achieve their goals. I'm going to cover a few more housekeeping details before we get underway. We do, again, as Emily said, encourage audience questions throughout today's webcast. To submit those questions, you're going to navigate your mouse to that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type in your questions at any time, and we'll get to as many as time permits, probably more toward the conclusion of the presentation. But first, we've got a question for you. In a moment, you're going to see a poll question pop up on your screen. We'd love for you to take a look at it, go ahead and review it, and we'll have the results of those elements shortly. As you are considering that poll question, you may also want to know a few more details about today's event. One is that we are going to record and archive this on facilitiesnet.com/webcasts, and that after the event, you will also receive an email that includes the slides from today's presentation, as well as a link to that archive. You'll also receive a CEU assessment. If you click and complete that assessment, we'll send you a CEU certificate for use in follow-up with your credentialing. All right, I think we've had some time to look at that poll. So let's go ahead and close that out. And I'm going to bring Miguel on board to have a look at those results and see what he can say. So Miguel, let's take a look and see what the poll says.
Great, I love this. I love seeing that 3 people here said that they had a very strong culture of collaboration. That's fantastic. The majority of people are in the strong, okay, or needs improvement section, which is great. We're all here to learn and hopefully be able to level up a little bit more. And so I love seeing this.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Over to you, Miguel. Let's see what we can do and make those poll numbers climb a little higher towards the collaboration side.
Great. I love it. Okay. Well, to start out, thank you so much for that great introduction. And as Wendy said, today our goal is to talk about how to unlock maintenance success with a culture of collaboration. And the first thing I think we should talk about is, what does it mean to have success in maintenance? These are my thoughts on that. The first is, I think that it means achieving our goals, whether that's the team goal, the company's goal. We have goals that we need to meet in maintenance, and I think that's a big part of success. Another one is a good working environment. We spend a lot of time at work, and we shouldn't be spending time at a place that we don't feel like it's a great environment for us. So I think that's a big part of success. That's another thing that we're going to be talking about today to create a better environment for ourselves and for our coworkers, and hopefully even in the future for ourselves. We all want to do quality work. That's one thing that I love about working in maintenance, is that everybody I work with, they care about a job well done. I've never talked to anybody in maintenance that's like, yeah, I like to just barely slide by. Everybody is proud of when they do a good job on their work. And so that's another part of maintenance success. And then another big piece is progress. We all want to look forward to something better in the future. And I think that's one of the big elements of work that can be overlooked. Sometimes people say, hey, things are working today, let's just leave it. But we actually feel a lot more excited about work when there's something to look forward to. Now, all of these things are affected by a culture of collaboration. A culture of collaboration is going to help us achieve all of these things. And today, of course, that's our topic, culture of collaboration. So today, we're going to learn about a case study that I saw, that I've read about because it was before I was born. We'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about what a collaborative culture really entails. a system for making positive change in maintenance and collaborative culture in your company, and the most common problems that I see in maintenance today and how to solve them. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, today's topic, is on Coca-Cola, but not that Coke, this Coke. Now, I'm actually not familiar with this Coke. Again, this was before my time, but if any of you are familiar with this, there was a time that Coca-Cola, the management, I should say, of Coca-Cola decided, let's try something new. Let's change our great recipe of Coke to something that's even better. They did some initial tests and saw that if they made their Coke a little sweeter and changed a few things, that the overall taste was more preferred by people. Well, it turns out that this was one of the most spectacular fails in business history. And it ended up leading to millions of dollars lost, and the management of Coca-Cola retracted the new recipe of Coke and went back to Coca-Cola how it was before. And that's why it's called Coca-Cola Classic today, is because they went back to the original classic flavor. Now, I believe that there were a lot of issues here, but I think that the problem was that management didn't involve enough people in the company in this decision. That if they would have really collaborated with everybody in the company that had a good understanding of what this change would entail, I think they would have realized that they would have lost a lot of money on this and it wouldn't have been a good idea. And that's actually what I want to talk about first. Is I want to make this interactive. So everybody, you can go to the Q&A section of your Zoom presentation. And I would like you to write about a time that you saw management fail on a part of a project. And while you're typing that up, I'm going to share one of my own experiences. I was talking to a technician, a maintenance technician at a company, and he told me that they got some new management in, and they walked into their inventory room and saw that it was a mess. It was full of all sorts of old parts and things that probably weren't being used anymore. And I'm sure you guys are thinking that you've never seen an inventory room that looks like that, right? Well, of course, it made sense to clean it up. So the new management came in and said, okay, anything that looks like it hasn't been used in the last 6 months, you need to remove it, throw it away. And that maintenance tech told me, yeah, see these two gears? These gears are part of a machine that is critical to our business's operation. And as soon as that machine goes out, we're going to need to replace these gears. And since we were told to throw all the old things away, we're throwing away these gears. And that means that it's going to be 10 weeks of downtime of that machine. And management's going to be really frustrated when that happens, because this is like that downtime is going to really kill our business. And I remember asking the technician, I was like, hey, well, you know that this is going to cause a problem. Why aren't you going to tell management about this? And he said, hey, this is a corporate mandate. They never asked me how to do this. They decided how they're going to clean up the inventory room. And if they want to throw away critical spares, then be my guest. And I remember thinking at the time, you know, that's a little bit petty, but at the same time, I could relate to him. He wasn't being involved. Nobody asked him his opinion. He is somebody who has a lot of knowledge about what's going on. And because nobody asked him, he didn't help as much as he could have. And I think that this is a great example of a failed approach by management. I'm going to hop over to the Q&A and see some things other people wrote as well. Let's see. Give me a second to read. I'm a slow reader, by the way. Oh, I really like this one. The explanation from management was too high-tech for the workers to understand. Workers complete the work, but not under the high-tech instructions. Oh, I like that one. So basically, they weren't saying, how do we find a way to make sure that this makes sense to people? That's great. I guess have some great experiences here. I'm just going to pick a couple of these. Oh, I like this one. This was doing a renovation and a remodel of a study space in higher education in 2023 that looks like something out of the 80s to meet budget requirements. You know, this reminds me of another project that I was involved with at a previous company. And we actually had cubicles that looked like they were from the 1980s. And one of the teams said, hey, will you let us design our own cubicles? And we will make sure that it comes in under the budget that you're already spending on cubicles. And they found some great things, and it looks so modern and clean, and it turned into a really beautiful space. And management was really open to collaborate with them on that. So I think that's actually a really great example that management could have potentially, in this situation, collaborated with your team and found a better remodel that didn't look like it was from the 80s. Which I'm from the 80s, so I like the new designs though, so I can understand that. All right, department equipment moved, not planned properly, remove required. Oh, I've definitely seen that happen before. Not planned properly, didn't get everyone involved, then you have to redo the work. That is a huge waste of time. Okay, well, thanks everyone. We're gonna move on. I really appreciate you jumping in and sharing some of your experiences. And as we move forward in this presentation, think about how those experiences are something that you can learn from and put those learnings into practice in your own organizations. All right. So moving forward, oops, I gotta update my screen now. Okay, so I really wish that there was a class on creating a collaborative culture. If you guys know of a school out there that teaches it, that would be great. Let me know. But as far as I'm aware, there isn't. So hopefully in this presentation, I can share some things that will actually be helpful in along these lines of helping you make some collaborative changes that really help your company move forward. And all of this comes from my perspective of working with hundreds and even thousands of companies over the years to help them make positive changes in their maintenance systems and their maintenance teams. All right, so one thing that I have noticed is that collaborative culture doesn't solely come from new software. A lot of companies will buy a new software system and they just throw it at people and say, okay, start using the new software, and they think it's going to make things all better. Software is a very important tool, and you can get huge benefits from using software. But you can't just throw it at people. It has to be a tool that is used in collaboration with some of the other principles that we're going to be talking about. Another thing that I've seen that doesn't work very well are just corporate mandates. Now, corporate mandates, there's a place for them. There are times when you have to do a corporate mandate. But again, that doesn't create a collaborative culture by itself. So what really makes a change, a positive change, is leadership. Now, I know I've worked with many maintenance leaders over the years, and many of them think to themselves on the inside, I don't know if I'm a great leader. And one thing that I want to reassure everyone is that leadership is actually a skill. It's not something that you're born with, it's something that you learn along the way. And those skills are things that you can be taught, and we're going to be talking about some of these principles that go into leadership that will be helpful. The next thing is teamwork. And you really can't create really positive, great changes without teamwork. And again, in this presentation, we're going to be talking about how to get your team working together. So we talked about principles. Here are the principles that I find to be very helpful. The first one is that people both hate and love change. And you're probably asking yourself, wait, how is that possible? How can it be both at the same time? Well, there is an explanation for that, but it kind of reminds me of an old episode of Cheers. Again, I grew up in the 80s, so maybe you guys have seen this, but I'm going to share a little clip from Cheers.
First, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Hey, whoa. Which was it? Just stay tuned, Noah. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity.
Boy, Stickins guy really liked to keep his butt covered, didn't he?
Okay, well, by saying that both people love and hate change, I'm not just trying to cover my butt. There actually is an explanation for this. So, in my example, I have two examples here. In example one, let's say that your car is going to be traded in for a new car, but you don't know what vehicle that's going to be. Are you going to be excited about that change? Well, you don't know what that new car is going to be. Maybe it's a car that you've always wanted. Maybe it's a car that you're going to hate. Maybe it's a car that is nice, but doesn't meet your needs. That is what most change looks like when management presents it to their team. They tell them change is coming, but they don't know what that change is going to look like. And so most people are going to default to say, I actually don't want change, because when you don't know the uncertainty, most people would assume that it's better to stick with what they already have. And that is one big problem with change. That's why people can hate change. But there's a different type of change. In example 2, let's say that your car is going to be traded in for your dream vehicle. It's going to meet your needs, whether your needs are to be a utility vehicle. Maybe you need a truck. Maybe you want a real fast Lamborghini. Whatever it is that you care about, that's what that new vehicle is going to be. Now, are you excited for the change? You probably are. This is why people can love change. You love change when you know that it's going to benefit you. So when we talk about change for our maintenance teams, it's going to be, how is that change going to be better than what the current state is? The next principle I want to talk about is that changing somebody's role changes their perspective. So you need to let people know their role in making changes. An example of this was when I worked with a company that was going to buy a new CMMS, a computer management, a maintenance management software system, basically what Limble does. And what they did is they knew that one of the people on their team was not a tech-savvy guy. He did not like new computers, new technology, anything like that. And so the maintenance manager approached him and said, I need your help. I am going to be adding a new maintenance system, and I want you to help me decide which one is the easiest one to use. I know that you don't like apps. I know that you don't like software. And that's why I need your help, because you're going to have a better understanding of which one is the easiest to use. And when he did that, that guy really felt empowered. He really wanted to help make changes. And he put a lot of effort into finding the one that was the easiest to use. And I thought that was a great way to change his perspective and allow him to make changes. Notice that the maintenance manager here didn't say, we're deciding if we want to get the CMMS or not. They knew they needed management software, but they involved this person to help them make the best choice for their team. And that really gave that team member a sense of ownership as well. This is what happens when you give a specific role to somebody to help them be involved in the change process. The other principle here is collaboration. You need to have multiple perspectives. Just like when we talked about with the Coke story, I'm sure that they didn't have all the perspectives they needed. Maybe somebody somewhere along the way in the company would have said, hey, if we change the recipe on everyone, are people going to freak out because there are people that like what we currently have? And I think that that is a great example of why we need to have everybody involved. We're going to talk about how to do that later in this presentation. Another big thing is iterate often. The reason why this is so important is that you can't have perfect plans from day one. And I see this mistake made a lot by companies. They come up with a really elaborate plan of every change that they want to make in the company, and then they never look back. They just move forward and start making those changes. But it doesn't give them a chance to learn along the way. You'll actually make much more progress, much more quickly, if you make small changes and you can iterate and say, okay, what is the next big thing? How did that last change go? What is it that we need to do today? And we're going to talk about some systems and how we make sure that we can iterate often. The last thing here is systems. And what I mean by systems is a no blame space. That means that when you are working with your team members, nobody gets blamed for anything. If something is wrong, you fix the system rather than blaming it on the people. An example of this that I had is on my team that I was managing. This was a couple years ago. I remember that there was a team member who did something very inefficiently. And I was a bit frustrated at first because I thought, this guy's doing it inefficiently, and the other team members are not doing it inefficiently. So there's got to be a problem with this guy. But then I stepped back and I realized he's actually a great employee. He works very hard. He cares about his job. I like working with him. The problem really isn't him. It really needs to be that I need to provide better systems for him. In this case, I needed better training. So I created a training on how to do this specific job duty in a very efficient way. So we created the training, put it in a PowerPoint, made it really simple to watch. We trained him on it. And guess what? Right after that, he started being very efficient, just like the other people were. And then I took that training and I made that part of our onboarding process. Everybody that came in the future, they had to go through that same training so they knew how to do it just as efficiently. Now, this is a very simple example, but it's an example of why it is that we need to focus on improving our systems and not people. If I would have gotten frustrated with that employee and thought that that employee was just efficient and not as good at his job, then we wouldn't have made the progress that we did. You'll find that if you can really focus on your systems and you don't create blame, people are going to be very excited to help you make those improvements. In fact, the people that sometimes struggle the most are the ones that are going to give you the best insights on how you can improve things. All right, so let's move forward and talk about a system for making positive change in maintenance. And again, the reason why change is important is because we always need to be evolving in business. I've talked to so many leaders over the years, and they always seem to say something along the lines of, if you're not improving, you're getting worse. And I think that's just because the world continues to evolve, and if we don't evolve with it, we're going to get behind. So this system is going to allow us to continuously make great changes in our maintenance teams and make a better environment for ourselves and for everybody we work with. So the first step is to announce that good change is coming. Now, again, we need to emphasize good change, and what that good change means is that that change is going to help the people that are involved. It's going to help your team. It's going to help other people in the company. So the thing that you need to do first is tell people that you're going to be making changes and that you want their help, so those changes are going to benefit them. And you're going to need to explain to them how they're going to be involved, that they're going to come up with the problems and the solutions to these issues. And one thing that I find helpful with this is sometimes on teams, there's somebody who's pretty resistant to change. And that's probably not their fault. Maybe they've had bad experience with change in the past. But you as a leader can really make a difference by meeting with that person individually. If you meet with somebody individually, it gives them an opportunity to be a little bit more open, explain their concerns a little bit more, and allows you to get better feedback from them. So I find that this can be a really good technique if you're worried about somebody in particular. And then if you're not, because if you do it in a group setting, sometimes they sit back and they're quiet and they think about all the negative things that they have to say about it, but they don't share it. If you go one-on-one with them, you're going to be able to make a lot more impact on helping them see how this change is going to be a good change. After you've made this change, you need to do a vision meeting. And this could be called a goals meeting. You can call it whatever you like. I like calling it a vision because the idea is to spell out what we want our jobs to look like in the future. So in the vision meeting, you need to involve every member of your team. And it's really important that everybody has input. There are probably going to be people on your team that are more quiet, and that's okay. In this meeting, you might recognize that certain people aren't participating as much, so ask them specific questions, especially if it's something that you know that they're passionate about, so that way they're collaborating as well. At the end of this, you want to make sure that everybody has collaborated and they know that they've collaborated, so they're going to be on board with these changes that you want to make. Throughout the process, you need to remember that you need to let people know that these changes are for them. If at any point they start thinking that you're making changes for some other reason and not to improve their lives, that's going to cause a little bit of friction. But if you can always bring it back to how it helps them, you're going to see great benefits from that. The next step is to make a list of what you want work to be like in the future. Now, this could be, there's so many different ways that you could go with this. There's so many different results. Every company has different needs, but I'm just going to list a few here that I see that are pretty common. One example is less work, less overtime requirement, less emergency work. That's one thing that people really want. It's less stressful when you have all this emergency work. When you have a lot of overtime requirements, well, then you might miss your child's birthday party or a family gathering, and that really takes a toll on people. So that's one example that you might want in the future for your maintenance team. Or maybe your team says, hey, we have too much paperwork, too much red tape. It's getting in the way of me being able to do my job well. Maybe they want better coordination, better records, so that way they can see how something was resolved in the past and they're not reinventing the wheel every time they run into a problem. Maybe they just want management to recognize how awesome they are. You know, one thing that I've noticed with maintenance teams is often they don't really get a lot of attention until something goes wrong and they say, this thing just broke, you need to fix it fast. Whereas when you have a lot of great visibility on the great things you're doing, you can really show your team, your management team, all the great things that you're doing, and that's a much better situation to be in. Okay, so, oh yeah, one more, almost forgot this one. Many maintenance teams need this. They just need more resources. They have fewer resources than what they need to be successful. So you make your list of the things that you want your work to look like in the future. And then the next thing is that you as a leader, you might have a few things to add to this list that your team wouldn't add because they don't have the same visibility that you have. They don't have that same role. So one example would be that maybe a key performance indicator that your department needs to hit, for example, a response time to problem tickets, or if you're in manufacturing, a certain amount of downtime percentage, something like that. And again, if you're going to bring up something that your team doesn't see as a need for them, it's important to show how this is going to help them. For example, if you can show them that you were going to hit this certain key performance indicator, then you can make a case to management that you can get more resources, better tools, or whatever it is that they need. Okay. Next section here is, now that you've talked about what you want things to look like in the future, it's time to talk about what is getting in the way today. These are the problems. Now, this is where your team is going to know this better than anyone else. They're going to say, hey, the reason why is because we have really old equipment, and this equipment's always breaking down, and it's probably costing more to fix this equipment than it would be to install new equipment. There's all these different problems that they're going to recognize when they realize that they have a vision and there's something getting in the way of that. And this is the best part, because once you have your problems written out, there's always solutions to problems. And I think that's one of the most empowering things about working with a collaborative team like this, is if you see problems, there's ways to come up with solutions for it. Now, I have a whole other presentation on how to come up with solutions to these problems, but the big thing that I've noticed here is that when a maintenance team is clearly able to define where the problems are, what's getting in the way, every time I've seen them come up with creative ideas on how to resolve those problems. And I think that's kind of the nature of having this vision meeting, is people are already feeling collaborative. They're going to come up with ideas. And if you give them additional constraints, like maybe we don't have the money for this, or we don't have the time for this, people will get creative and you can focus on how to solve those problems. So moving forward, you need to do a similar meeting with other departments. Typically, you want to meet with the department heads and you want to let them know about the improvements that your team wants to make, but you want to make sure that their needs are being met in the improvements that you're making as well. And you need to show them that the improvements that you're making in maintenance are going to help them. This is really helpful in larger companies, but I've even found this to be very helpful in small companies as well, because when you can start collaborating with other members of management of other teams, you're going to find that this is going to make a big impact for them, and it's going to help your team as well. A great example that I've seen is a lot of times other departments heads say, hey, we've been submitting work requests and they seem to get lost, they seem to be forgotten about, or they're not prioritized. And so now we're just finding your team wherever we can and asking them to do us favors along the way. And that can be a really inefficient process. And so that would be an example of seeing that their need is that they need quicker response time to their requests as well, or at least better communication on that. Keep that in the back of your mind, because we're going to be talking about some tools that can be used to help with that kind of a situation. But the main goal here is you want to get other departments involved and make sure that the improvements you're making help them as well. All right. So we've got to the point where we understand what we want our company to look like in the future, what we want our work to look like in the future, and we know what's getting in the way. And hopefully by this point, you've talked through some solutions with your team and you have some ideas on what you want to fix. But the big thing is, as a leader, is that you need to prioritize what's going to be fixed. Don't try to fix everything at once. That's impossible. It's overwhelming. It's unproductive. Rather, choose one or two things at the beginning that you can focus on. And I think that it's really important to choose based on the following two criteria. One is to choose something that you can have a quick win. And there's a lot of projects out there that will take months and money and large amounts of money to make them work. I find that it's best to start out with some things that can make some improvements quickly. And that is going to allow your team to be excited. It's going to give them a lot of positive energy for other projects. And it's also going to free up their time, because if you've made some improvements today, hopefully it saves them a little bit of time so they have more time to put into other projects that can make improvements as well. Another big thing to think about when it comes to making positive changes is the 80-20 rule. And that is, think of what is the smallest amount of work that will give me the biggest amount of returns. Sometimes I like to look at that as how can I fix something part way that makes the biggest impact? A great example of that I've seen in maintenance is they say, hey, we have so many parts that we need to keep on hand. We have a huge room of inventory. Let's identify which ones are the most important piece, the critical spares to have on hand. And let's make sure that we have those on hand, that they're well labeled. And that is going to make a much bigger impact than making sure every single inventory item is being kept track of. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of these most common problems later on in the presentation and some solutions that allow you to do this 80-20 rule to make some big results with a minimal effort. All right. The next big step is, so if you remember, we've talked to the team about what we want things to look like. We've talked about what's getting in the way. We've talked about some of the changes that you're going to make and making sure that you're making you're prioritizing the right changes. Now what you need to do is iterate often. And the best way to do that is a weekly review meeting. The goal of this meeting is to keep the vision and the priority. It's to continue learning. It's to show your team that they're being heard on a continuous basis. So the best way to do this meeting is same time every week, whether that's a Monday or a Friday is typically what I see. Your team gets together. And it's really important that it's set on their schedules because things don't get missed if it's on the schedule. If you just say, oh, we'll try to meet when we get a chance, it's going to get missed. Things come up. You need to put this as a priority. And in this meeting, I find that there's an agenda that you can use. I'm using some sample things. You don't have to use all these things, but I find that these are some great things to go over in this meeting. The first one is, what went well this week? You know, who did a great job? Like, we should recognize people that did something that was spectacular, things that worked well. And then the next thing is, what could have gone better? And this is where you can figure out what needs to be improved for this upcoming week. A great example is that somebody says, hey, something broke down. Maybe if we had a preventative maintenance task scheduled, then we could have prevented this problem altogether. Or maybe they already did have a preventative maintenance task, but it was missing some pieces. And that's a really easy thing to make improvements on for the next week. And again, I know I've talked about this before, but I think it bears repeating. Don't blame things on people. When we talk about what could have gone better, if people are feeling like there's blame there, that's going to shut future progress down. And so you might need to, in this meeting, remind people that you don't think they did anything wrong. Instead, there's something wrong with the systems, and the systems is what we're here to fix. And you're going to find that that's going to be very helpful. The next thing that you can talk about in your agenda item is what you accomplished this week that brought us closer to our vision. We never want to lose sight of that vision. If you lose sight of that vision, you're going to work on projects that aren't as important. But now that you know that vision that you're going to have, we're going to have, for example, fewer breakdowns and fewer emergency work and less requirements for overtime on the weekends. If that's your vision, you need to make sure that you come back to that and say, okay, what did we do this week that actually helped us get there? And if progress wasn't made, then you need to find out why and make sure that next week that you can make some more progress towards that vision. If you're always doing that, you're going to see huge improvements over time. And then the last thing is to talk about what you're going to improve this week. You always want to make progress, even a little bit, even if it's a pretty busy week, on how you get a little bit closer to your vision, even if it's as simple as adding a new preventative maintenance schedule. But whatever it is, if you're always making progress every week, you're going to make huge progress over time. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next section of this presentation, and that is the most common problems maintenance teams face and how to solve them. Okay, so you have more breakdowns than resources, problems with communication, you don't have the right parts on hand, you have a hard time showing value as a maintenance team. Again, maintenance teams are usually called when there's a problem, and it's hard to be showing a lot of value when people just see you as the fix-it crew. Now, that is one thing that is amazing about Limble, is that a great computerized maintenance management system can really solve these problems, and we're going to talk about that. So one of the big problems that I see with maintenance teams, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this, is that you have more breakdowns, more problems than the resources you have to solve them. So you're always feeling behind, you're always feeling overwhelmed, you're always feeling like you don't have what you need to really be successful. One thing that is great about a maintenance management system is that you can automate the preventative maintenance schedules. And this takes a lot of pressure off your team, because if it shows up if they can look at their schedule every day of what they need to be doing, and they're doing some things that are going to prevent problems in the future, those get prioritized, and then you have fewer breakdowns, fewer big issues. It's much better to prevent a problem than it is to fix a problem after it's happened. And this is where efficiency can really be boosted by a maintenance management system. One thing that we've seen with Limble is that it's like adding an extra person for every 3 people on your team. So if you have a team of 6 people, it's like hiring an extra 2 people on your team. That is a huge efficiency boost. There are so many things about Limble that can make your team more efficient when it comes to making sure that priorities are being taken care of, making sure that you can look up the manual for every piece of equipment on your phone, finding out how to solve problems. There's a huge list here, and I can't get to all of them. It would be way too long. But what I love seeing is that teams become more efficient. And I actually have an example from this. This is one of our customers by the name of Matt Hazeman. And it was so interesting. When I went on site to visit him, and as soon as I saw him, I wish I would have had my camera out, because the first thing he said is, "Limble changed my life." And I was like, "Okay, Matt, what are you talking about? Tell me what's going on." He told me that when he first started working at that company, he was working 14-hour days. There were just too many breakdowns. He was spending all day at work, no time at home, and he was so frustrated because it was just putting out fires. But then he got Limble, and he said, "Okay, every time I solve a problem, I'm going to document exactly how we fixed it." So his particular type of equipment have a lot of error codes. So every time they had an error code, he would fix it. He would document it in the maintenance management system. And then the people that he worked with, they could look up how he fixed it in the past. And basically, he made it super simple for his team to do that, as well as preventative maintenance schedules. And there were so many other things that came from adding Limble to one of his tools that he used to manage his maintenance team. He said that he went from working 14-hour days to 8-hour days. He was able to go home at 5 p.m. every day, eat dinner with his family. And he was so efficient that the CFO contacted him and said, "Hey, we want you to do this for multiple plants. We're going to promote you to the director over 3 plants." And his career took off from being able to make his team more efficient. The next big problem that I see teams run into is communication. Everybody has their daily priorities, but sometimes people don't know what those daily priorities are. And another big issue is just like the coordination. As the day goes on, you're constantly needing to coordinate with people. And that can be hard to do, but with the maintenance management system, and what I was going to say about coordination, I should remind you that those could be work requests or problem reports that come in. Limble has a great work request system, so you can make sure that people are always getting updated. So in Limble, when you get a work request coming in, you can notify the people that you're going to be working on it and when that's going to happen, so they know and they're not going to be pestering you. And then another great thing about that is that everyone knows exactly what's going on, and you're going to find that other teams are going to be much happier with how your team is handling the issues that they're running into. And I actually there's a couple stories here that I could share. One of them that I want to share, though, is from Brian Coates. And he was a maintenance technician at a large facility in California. And one thing that he said to me that I wasn't expecting is he was like, you know what? Limble keeps me in line. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, there's so much that I need to do every day, but I always can see my priorities. So I know what my boss cares about the most, and I focus on those things, and he's happy and I'm happy. And I thought, that's a really good thing, because sometimes people think that somebody who isn't being very effective can be lazy. And maybe it's more that there's so many things to work on, they don't know what to prioritize, and that can either make them less efficient or make them more frustrated. But he found that when he did that, he always had his priorities, and he felt like it was saving him time. But really what I think it was helping him stay focused on what mattered most. And that's one of the great things about how Limble helps with communication. All right, next big thing is not having the right parts on hand. Now, this is really important, because if you run out of the stock that you need to have, you're going to have long delivery time waits, or you're going to have to send somebody to the store to drive out there. And that is completely wasted time. With Limble, you can keep track of all your inventory, and it lets you know when inventory is running low enough that it's time to reorder before you run out. There's a lot of other benefits to inventory management, such as working with your vendors as well. Again, there's too many benefits here for me to get into, but I'm presenting some of the most common problems and some easy solutions through a maintenance management system. So a great example of this is Greg Anderton. He works at a company also close to where I live. A lot of these people are close to where I live because I can drive out to visit them, even though we have customers all over the world. But Greg here, he had a lot of inventory. He also has a very big facility that he's managing. And what I saw is that he was able to use Limble to really manage his storeroom. What might be a little hard to see here is that each one of these inventory items has a label on it with a QR code. Before this, his inventory room didn't look nearly as organized from what he explained to me, but it was through Limble that he was able to organize his parts and make sure that he always had them on hand. This can make a huge difference. There's another facility not too far from him who I remember they had a fuse go out and they couldn't find a fuse, and they had to send somebody an hour drive to Salt Lake City, which required just to buy a new fuse. So that was an hour of time to drive there, 20 to 30 minutes to actually get the right part from will call, and then another hour drive back. They spent about 5 times as much on that part than as they would have online, but they had to do that because they needed that part right away. Whereas if they could have ordered these way ahead of time, they would have saved not only that money on the part, but that was 3 hours out of that guy's day where he could have been productive doing other things. The last thing I want to talk about is how a CMMS can help you show value to the leaders and to the rest of your company. Now, as you guys know, when you're doing maintenance, you don't have time to keep track of everything, but with Limble, it can keep track of everything for you. It's going to make sure that all of your KPIs, all your reports, everything that you need to report on is automatically there, and you're going to have more information than you've ever had. A great example of this was Joe Romero, another one of our customers. He worked at a large medical facility, and he said, I was able to tell my boss that we completed over 975 work orders in the last 3 months. He said that before this, he never had any proof. He felt like he was always busy, but it was hard to explain to his management how big of an impact they were having. Another one is Josh Sylvester. He told me that once a quarter, he would actually pull an all-nighter at work because he would have to make a report for the CEO, and it took hours and hours and hours to gather all his data in time to meet with his CEO and show them what they've done. When we got Limble for him, we set up those reports beforehand. So when it came time to give that report, all he had to do was hit print because everything was logged as his team did the work. Okay, so we've talked about a lot today. So let's do a quick recap. It's important to create a collaborative culture of leadership and teamwork. And that needs to be done through making sure that everybody's involved. Another big principle is that people like change when they know how it benefits them. If you want to involve people, give them a role in making that change. That's going to empower them and get them involved. Iterate often. Don't come up with a giant plan. Make some changes today, then reevaluate what's the next important thing. You're going to make much faster progress that way. No blame on people. It's about improving systems. The people that you work with are probably hard workers and care about their job. It's probably not them, it's probably the systems that need to be improved. The big process that we talked about today is to announce that change is coming, to hold a vision meeting, to meet with leaders from other departments to understand their needs as well, to prioritize what you're going to fix next, and then to hold a weekly review meeting so you continuously improve and iterate every week. And then lastly, we talked about tool that can be helpful. A computerized maintenance management tool is one of the tools that can help you solve the most amount of problems most quickly. You know how we talked about making those quick wins? A maintenance management software can be that quick win for so many problems. You can do more with your current resources. You can make better communication and make that easier. You can help, you can make sure that you have the right parts on hand and that they're there when you need them. You can also show value to your company by getting all the data of what your team is doing. And one thing we haven't even talked about is how much that data can help you make better decisions in the future, but that's for another day. Well, if any of you are interested in something like this, Limble is actually 100% free. You can get a full system of Limble for free, unlimited time, but you can also get a demo if you want somebody to help walk you through that. So feel free to scan that QR code if you're interested in that, or you can request a demo as well. All right, so let's get to the Q&A portion. Are there any questions from anyone about what was presented today or any other questions that you have? Tell us what's on your mind. We'd be happy to talk about it.
Thanks, Miguel. We do have a question right away, and I think you can navigate back to that recap slide. I think that really is a helpful place for us to stay for a moment.
Oh, yeah.
You know, as I guess straightforward as that content is, it is something that I think we could all benefit from reviewing again. And I really appreciate some of the options that you talked about in terms of how those meetings, you know, can be run with the celebration, the little more scrutiny and what can be done better. But then this review process really helps people kind of drive home some of their opportunities. So there you go.
Great.
From this,
is this the right slide, by the way?
yeah,
Is
let's
that what
make
you're
sure,
doing?
Lawrence, if you want to just chat another question, we want to make sure this is the appropriate one. And as he's going to confirm that with us, Miguel, could you maybe point to where you feel some of the more common transition? Oh, Lawrence says he thinks it might be the one before. Let's take a look
Great.
at that.
I'd be happy to go to that one. Here we go.
All right, great. So then as we look at this slide, you know, is there one that you think provides or offers or the highest level of challenge in terms of implementing throughout an organization? Is there any one that you see as kind of a constant that crops up as this is what we really have trouble with?
You know, that's a hard one because I feel like every time as I'm reading through the list, I'm like, oh, that one's the most important. Oh, wait, no,
Right.
that next one's the most important. So yeah, it's hard. You know, one thing that I have seen, I was going to talk a little bit about this on when it comes to blaming people, is there are times when somebody is at fault and it might be time to, you know, talk to that person, maybe some disciplinary action in some extreme cases, or even more so, that you might need to let that person go. So there are times when it is time to blame someone, but that is more, well, I shouldn't say blame, there are times when somebody's not the right fit. But that's typically when somebody is either not trying, or even if they're trying, they're just not going to be able to get the work done well. In that case, it's time to think about maybe a different role for that person. But with that being said, I think that is less common. And the bigger thing is saying, okay, I need to be mature enough to realize that the systems that I have are not perfect, and that's okay. And with that knowledge, I'm going to make things better. I'm going to make things easier for people. So somebody that even is less good at their job can be very successful here. I think that's really hard to do as a manager because you have to be a little bit introspective and not let your pride get in the way and realize that something could be done better. A great example of that is I've seen a lot of companies say, oh, everybody has their own way of fixing this one thing, and find out who's doing that the best and then document that and make that the standard practice. And it's probably not going to be perfect. Maybe you need to iterate and improve that practice, but that's going to be a much better system than just letting everybody kind of figure out their own way of solving the same problem.
It's interesting because I think sometimes we hear the word process and we think of a very technical approach to solutions, but this has a very human side to it. And I find that to be, somewhat interesting. And I think it might be news to a lot of us in the audience.
Yeah,
we
I
did
like that
have-
because when you say
Yeah.
process, you're right, that it's not necessarily a software. It's not necessarily, there's so many different things that be considered a process. One thing that I found really helpful with our team is that we create, we have a software where we have lists of everything that needs to get done in certain ways. And a CMMS is a great tool for that in maintenance. But make that list, make it in order, think about what that is. Another great process, for example, is just how people go about their day. One way to do that is if you have a maintenance management software, you can say, okay, at the beginning of your day, you look at what the priorities are on your list. You gather up all your tools, you gather up all your parts, and then that way you don't ever have to go back to your desk and you can go from item to item in the priority order. And another great example of a process in maintenance that I find really helpful is people often get interrupted throughout the day. People tap on their shoulder and say, hey, can you fix this thing I have over there? And a great process here is to say, hey, I would love to help you with that. However, I have some priorities that I need to take care of today. Will you submit a work request through Limble? So that way it goes to the right person and it gets allocated to the person who can do that the fastest. And then that way, as a maintenance worker, you're not getting interrupted and getting slowed down. And then that person's going to get help faster and everything's going to be more efficient. That's another great example of a process that's not technical, but makes a big impact.
It sounds like a nice balance. You've talked about that weekly review meeting, but this lets you go drill down a little more into the day-to-day. So I'm wondering if you have any other nuggets for, how some of those smaller ways to motivate teams on that daily basis goes forward. I think that's a great example. Are there any other examples that you can share, Miguel?
Yeah, I think that you used a great word, which is motivate. How do you motivate change? How do we do that with the team? And I think every team's different. Some teams respond great to like challenges and like prizes. Whereas other teams are going to look at that and feel like that's a little bit juvenile. So it depends what your team needs. But I think that everybody is motivated by their lives being easier. And so I think that when you have that review meeting, a great additional question you can ask is, what should have been easier this week that wasn't? Or what was something that irked you a little bit? And you can talk through that. And sometimes it helps to just let somebody get it off their chest and everybody goes, yeah, that is a little frustrating.
Right.
But sometimes you can come up with a solution and say, we can make this a little better. And a great example of that I already shared was, people are always tapping on my shoulder to say, will you fix this thing over here? And you're like, I didn't bring the tools for that. I'm in the middle of a project, but you want to be a nice person, so you stop what you're doing. But in the end, that makes you less efficient throughout the day. Most workers that I've talked to, they really like to be efficient. They love getting a lot done during the day. It makes them feel good. People think oftentimes that maintenance workers would love to have a day just being leisurely and kicking back. In practice, I really don't see that. I see that people actually feel much more energized when they feel like, yeah, I got a lot done in today and there weren't nearly as many hiccups as there could have been. That is motivating.
Yeah, it's definitely relatable, I would imagine, to a lot of people on the call today, Miguel. I'm going to answer one question that came in because I think I can answer it, but then I'm going to make you answer the harder ones. The question is, are we going to get a copy of these slides? Yes, all our attendees will receive an email either later today or tomorrow with links to both the presentation content as well as the archive. And don't forget, you also can achieve CEU credit for this presentation as well. Okay, that was the easy question. Back to you, Miguel. Couple questions have come in, and I think we can kind of combine them. The first one is, how do you change culture? So, like I said, that's a tougher question. But Lawrence also commented, sometimes the C-suite leadership needs to maybe have a mirror. We've gotten some amazing tools here about creating that collaboration within the team and creating both autonomy and accountability. How then do we move that up the ladder and into that corner office? Or how do we at least talk about it, start the discussion?
Oh, these are great questions. I actually do want to address that first one. How do you change culture? That's a big one. I think that changing culture is it's something that we all need to be doing to some degree. We want to be improving culture. So if you think, oh, I need to change culture and other people don't, the answer is probably everybody needs to change their culture and make some progress in some way. So when you want to change culture, it's actually, you can do that. You can follow the same process that we're talking here. The process that we outlined today is a process of changing culture. It's letting people know, I want to make some changes and I want these changes to be better for you. I need your help. It's going over the same steps that we talked about. You're going to find that that's going to get people to change. Another thing to think about when it comes to culture is what you tolerate. So, for example, if you have this weekly meeting and people are showing up late, and if you're tolerating that, then you have created a culture of it's okay to be late to this important meeting. Actually, maybe the meeting isn't important because it's okay to be late. So when it comes to what you tolerate, if you really want to be doing this, you need to make sure that you're getting those people's inputs and that you're listening to them. And that when you have that meeting that you say, hey, Jerry, I saw that you were late today. This is really important because I want to make changes that improve work for you. But if you're late, it makes it more difficult. Will you be on time to the next meeting? Changing culture is something that happens little by little. But what's important is if you can show people that you're here to help them and you can collaborate in the ways that we've talked about today, you will see an improvement in culture.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you, Miguel. Again, something I think we can all take to heart, can all have a stake in that. So I'm going to move over to that second part of the question and just mention we probably have time for this and maybe one more question with Miguel. But the question was, that C-suite leadership, how do we make sure that they are aware of and integrated with some of these amazing approaches and processes that you shared today?
Yeah, I think that this is a fantastic question. And I was actually planning on putting a whole section in the presentation about this anyway. So I'm glad we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Working with the C-suite is something that is difficult for many people in maintenance because you are going to require that they spend money. And most of us in maintenance, we're not salespeople. We don't have that background, but that's okay. Again, everything's a skill and there's a process to everything too. The number one thing with working with C-suite is finding out what they would like to see from you. This is a hard conversation for a lot of people because they basically have to ask, what is it that you don't like about what we're doing? But if you can set your ego aside and say, how can we improve? What improvements do you want to see? What do you care about? You're going to find that they're going to be open with you and that you're going to know what they care about. And when you know what they care about, that usually aligns with the things that you need. So for example, we're frustrated that these breakdowns are happening at the worst possible times. And then you as a maintenance manager are probably going to know what you need to have fewer breakdowns. Maybe you need to have better preventative maintenance and you need a computer-aided maintenance management software to make sure that you're on track of all that. Or maybe you need newer equipment and you can say, okay, I see that that's what your goal is. I would love to deliver that. Here's what I need to deliver that. And they're going to be able to see that. And sometimes you need to talk about dollars and cents here. I see this a little bit more in manufacturing, a little bit less in facilities, but the same principles apply. Sometimes you have to say, okay, we're spending $3,000 a year on maintaining this piece of equipment. A new piece of equipment costs $4,000. It's probably worth it to just replace it. And here's what's great about a system like Limble is it's going to keep track of all your expenditures for you. So you're going to have the dollars and cents that help you make that argument. when it comes to management, sometimes people get frustrated and they say, oh, they just care about money. Well, that money is what keeps the company alive. And so that having a tool like Limble in your pocket, you're going to be able to show them the money where that's going and make a really good argument for them.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective to be able to share. We're kind of seeing it through the lens of the C-suite, but also know that this, you've got access to data through Limble that helps you bring your argument forward, or at least start that discussion. That's fantastic.
That's right. We
are at the top of the hour, so that means we're at the end of our time, but Miguel, it's hard to say stop on such a great conversation. I'd love for you to maybe just share maybe next steps for our audience. Where do you think our viewers today could go next to start to understand a little bit more about what opportunities are there for them?
Yeah. At Limble, our goal, and you may have seen this on my screen here, that our goal is to empower the unsung heroes. We're here to help you. We offer Limble for free, and we also have a team of people that you can chat into. If you go to our website, you can see there's a little chat bubble. I think last time I clicked on it, it was Noah. Noah's based out of California. There's real people there that can help you. So feel free to use that. And we also have an upcoming webinar if you want to learn more about some of the things that we can help with.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And that slide will be part of what is delivered to all of us today or tomorrow via email with that QR code and additional contact information. So with that, I would like to say thank you, Miguel, for an excellent presentation. Thank you to Limble for your support of this very, very important topic and to supporting our industry in general. We really appreciate it. With that, I will say again, thanks to our audience for being here today, and we will conclude today's webcast. Have a great day.
Thank you, Wendy.